Okay, well, let's talk about this season, Beth. What are the key moments that stand out for you? Where did they win it? How did they win it? Long answer. No, but what were the key sort of moments you think that Arne Slot really came to the fore this season?
Yeah, I think the first big test was winning at Old Trafford, and I know you can look and look at United's league form this season and say, well, maybe that's not actually that impressive. But Liverpool, Manchester United, regardless of form, it's always a massive game. I mean, it was the same last season. Liverpool went there in the March. They lost in the FA Cup in spectacular fashion. They went there a couple of weeks later in the league and ended up drawing 2-2. And that Liverpool team was still far better than the Manchester United were at that time. But the game and the weight and the history of that matchup can sometimes trip teams up. So for his first visit there to be a resounding win, a fantastic performance, I think that was the first day that a lot of Liverpool fans looked at that and thought, hang on, we've got something here maybe. I'd say after that, the next sort of defining moment was the defeat to Nottingham Forest, because I think you go into that weekend, and again, it's one of those with hindsight you look back on and you think, well, maybe it's not that surprising. Forest have had an excellent season, and as Mark said, they caused a lot of problems for Liverpool in the reverse fixture as well. But I think at that point you're thinking that could completely derail Liverpool's season, and actually having made such a great start, maybe this is the start of a downward spiral. But I think it became a little bit of a running joke. Pretty much every press conference for about 3 months after that, he mentioned the Nottingham Forest game and the defeat, and you could tell it was really, really weighing on his mind. And I think the lessons learned from that, you saw that in practice over the next few months, and then it gets to that point in late November, early December, where they play Real Madrid in the Champions League and Manchester City in the Premier League back to back. I think we were both there for both of those games, and obviously it didn't work out in the Champions League, but what a huge statement that was, beating both of those teams that have historically caused an awful amount of problems for Liverpool so comprehensively, and the scoreline probably flattered both of those teams. They absolutely battered Real Madrid, who were without a couple of key players, but they just made them look fairly average, as Arsenal obviously did in the quarterfinals. But yeah, I think that week was the first time where everyone was like, hang on, this what started out as a good start to the season is now very much becoming a very good season.
I'm going to ask you this question first before I think Beth's answer will be fairly obvious, but there's a bit of resentment on Merseyside right now that people are suggesting it's been a weak league because, City have had a poor season, Chelsea have been nowhere near, Arsenal have been not as close to challenge as they should have been, Man United and Tottenham away down the league. Do you think that's fair? Do you think Liverpool have won a substandard league this year, or do you think they deserve more credit than that?
I think they have won a substandard league this year, but they've done it very, very well. I covered the Fulham defeat the other week, and the piece I did after that, which I got a little bit of criticism for, which I can understand, but is has there ever been a team that has been such a deserved Premier League winner in waiting, but also is so obviously in need of a rebuild? They don't look like a Manchester City where you're just thinking, well, where are the weaknesses? This is just going to be dominance for years and years. We're all asking the question about whether they can back this up. And the reason we're asking that question is because A, the rivals haven't been there this season, and B, when you watch them play, you can see how they can be got at. And it's not like I know they've scored a lot of goals this season, and their attack has kind of won them the league, really. Certainly it's been way better, way more consistent than Arsenal's, for example. But you do look at that side and you think they need 3, 4, maybe 5 players in the summer for the whole squad. I'm not necessarily saying 5 first-team players, but it is a squad that needs some significant work.
Well, is this the final flourish of Klopp's team? I mean, that could be the negative way of looking at it, but Salah, Van Dijk, Trent, a couple of others that were such great players for Klopp. Is this just that this is their last great season and that rebuild has to come? Otherwise, they risk a season next year where it's going to be a lot tougher, because Arsenal look like a rising force, clearly. They went to Real Madrid and beat them twice home and away. City, you'd expect we're back next season because they will spend money. The rest, who knows? But still, Liverpool, they're going to win the title by the 20th time. It feels like they're at a crossroads.
Yeah, I think there's different ways of looking at it. I do completely agree. I think they need to spend in the summer, because I think if they were to go in with the same squad, that there's a chance that they maybe stagnate. So I think that there are obvious areas for improvement. But you can look at that and say, this isn't the best Liverpool team that I've watched in my lifetime. I'd say probably the best Liverpool team in my lifetime was the 2018-19 season, when they finished on 97 points and they didn't win the Premier League. So you can look at that and say, well, will anyone connected with Liverpool care whatsoever? Because
absolutely not.
At the end of the day, it's the record books will say that Liverpool have won a 20th league title, perhaps only losing 2 games en route to that. And I think what we've seen this season actually is maybe reverting to a title race sort of before Manchester City. You know, that the best title races over the past few years.
So you said that like
Leicester? the past few years, you know, the standards that City and Liverpool have set were just absolutely astronomical. And in that season I've just referenced, when Liverpool lost the league by a point, you know, they lost one game all season, and that was a 2-1 defeat away to Manchester City, where they were 11 millimetres away from the ball going over the line to get a draw. And they'd have been, you know, invincibles, centurions, and won the league. So I think what we've seen this season is, previously it's felt like whenever you've dropped a single point in a title race against Manchester City, you're automatically on the back foot. And because of Arsenal's inconsistencies, it's not been that way this season, because City haven't been there. You know, Liverpool haven't had someone breathing down their necks. And I actually think that hasn't helped Liverpool. I will say, I think that the past few weeks, some of the performances, certainly that defeat at Fulham, you know, they were winning that game. And I genuinely do think it was a little bit of complacency crept in. I'm not saying it sort of even consciously, but I just think, you know, when you know that you've got such a big cushion and the stakes aren't as high, naturally, you're not going to be playing at the same level. So I do think, you know, Liverpool probably haven't been playing at the highest level because they've not had someone breathing down the necks. But in terms of it being a weak league, I mean, you know, you've got the team potentially finishing in 16th and 17th are going to be in the Europa League final, possibly in Manchester United.
Yeah, but that probably says more about the Europa League than it does about anything else.
Quite possibly, but you've got an Arsenal team who drew with Brentford, who drew with Everton, who lost to West Ham, who've just beaten Real Madrid, the European champions, home and away.
It's interesting what you make that point about. This is a pre-City Liverpool dominance title race. Man United 2013 dropped off a cliff after Ferguson left. They were the great champions. Chelsea under Conte, they had a bad season the following year.
10th.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got, I mean, Leicester's not really an accurate comparison, but even Man City under Pellegrini, they dropped off after winning their title. So maybe we are getting back to that situation whereby this isn't, I agree with you, this doesn't look like a team that's going to kick on to be a dominant force. It might do if they have a rebuild, but that's the challenge for Slot, isn't it? To make sure this isn't a kind of not a flash in the pan, but it has to be more than it is. But I don't see next season where the dominant team comes from.
Well, put it this way, you're not, when we have to do our, which I hate, the predictions at the start of the season, which obviously we all get wrong, and I'm pretty sure I didn't have Liverpool in the top 4, so there we go. You know, true to form again. But I don't think when those graphics come out on the ESPN social channels, everybody's going to say Liverpool are going to win the league next year. There will be a varied opinion. Whereas in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, it's just been, well, you just have to say it's Man City because they're just so obviously the best team and they're so obviously well set. Liverpool have a challenge ahead of them this summer, which is to almost cement their status at the top of the table in the market by reinforcing the positions that we know they're vulnerable in.
Yeah, I do completely agree. But I also think, you know, obviously the closest challenges this season are Arsenal, and I can't remember which one of you said that they're sort of the rising force at the moment, and it was so impressive across those 2 legs against Real Madrid, but they've been poor in the league this season. You know, there've been times watching them this season and everyone keeps saying they need to buy a striker. I don't think it's just that. I think they've looked average at times, and I don't, to me, you know, they don't necessarily look like they're on the precipice of being fantastic. Have as well.
I mean, so Man United at Anfield, which they could have lost.
Yeah.
The Carabao Cup final was a real kind of a bit of a warning shot for me that on a big occasion they lost to a team. Again, Newcastle are a rising force, I think, with under Eddie Howe. Let's hope he gets better soon, by the way. And the Leicester away win, the Fulham away result, maybe, I don't know, there's something about Liverpool's start this year. They fully deserved it, absolutely. They've been the best team, but the second half of the season has set alarm bells ringing for me, thinking that maybe it was winning the first half of the season, the Klopp team has flourished for the final time, and he's got a bigger job in the summer than people think, because it might get kind of obscured by the fact they're winning the league.
Yeah, I do completely agree with you. I take your point, but I also think as well, you know, like a lot of people talk about the best Liverpool teams being that 18-19 team, 19-20 team that win the league at a canter under Jurgen Klopp. And I was looking back the other day through sort of some of the results from that season, and there were a lot of 2-1s, 1-0s, late goals, scrappy wins, and I think sometimes you look back with rose-tinted glasses and you go, oh, well, weren't they a great team? And, you know, you have a tendency now to look and you think, well, you know, that win over Leicester, at the time you look at it and you say, well, it wasn't a great performance. They creaked a little bit at times. In a year, 2 years, 3 years' time, people look back and go, oh, that great Trent goal at Leicester. You know, that's what you remember. So I think, you know, now we can analyse them and say, yeah, maybe they're not the best champions. They're absolutely not. They're not as good as the best Manchester City team. They're not as good as the best Liverpool team, but they're still a very good team. They've lost 2 games. And I'd argue that Fulham game, they probably wouldn't have lost had they been in a tighter title race.
Yeah, goalkeeper should have saved that. Anyway, looking forward, I think we all agree that Liverpool have got to do something in the market this summer. Christos Akas was his chief scout at Feyenoord, now an advisor for the teams owned by Marinakis at Nottingham Forest. He talks about Arne Slot and how he likes to be involved in everything.
Arne officially took over right after Dick Advocat, but because I think Arne is not a person that would be able to stand still and do nothing. I can never imagine Arne doing this. He was already going through some things before he took over. I think he was trying to gather as much information as possible. He likes to be on top of things, that's for sure. He likes to have an idea of what's going on in everything that could affect a team performance or the day-to-day running of a club. That's how he naturally is. And he's a person that he naturally attracts people in a way as a leader of a multi-billion-dollar corporation would do. So he has this kind of charisma that people would just naturally gravitate towards him. But he's also a person that doesn't want to let anything to go by chance. He wants to be to control his own fate as much as this is possible.
Well, let's talk about the potential ins and outs in a bit more detail. Trent Alexander-Arnold, likely to go, we think. Is Conor Bradley ready to step into his shoes, do you think? Or do you think they need to sign someone to compete with him in that position or be ahead of him in that position?
I think they certainly need to sign someone in that position, and I think that someone needs to be someone who is potentially going to be competing for that starting spot. I think that bringing in someone like a Kostas Tsimikas, who has been, really has been the perfect backup left back for 5 seasons, because he's played a decent amount of minutes, he's always handled himself well, but hasn't been at the level where you'd say he's a successor to Andy Robertson. So I think they maybe need to go for someone a little bit more likely to assert themselves in the team. But I absolutely don't think Conor Bradley's talent is in any doubt. He's a massive, massive talent. I think my biggest concern with him is he's had a lot of niggly injuries this season that have kept him out for 2-3 weeks at a time, and that's without necessarily playing the amount of minutes that he'll be expected to play next season if Trent does go. So I think, you need someone who, if he's, still only very young, still only 21, so he's still maybe sort of adapting to playing at this level. He's only played something like 23 games in the Premier League, 24 games in the Premier League. It's a big gamble in a way.
What about Joe Gomez, though? If you had Joe, if he's fit, Gomez and Conor Bradley at that position, that seems okay to me.
I think the caveat with Joe Gomez, is he fit, is one that I think Liverpool are too familiar with, unfortunately. I'm a massive fan of Joe Gomez, and I think when he is fit, he's such an asset because he can play in so many different positions and he can play, so well in so many different positions. But I think, Gomez very much has to be seen at almost as a little bit of a luxury, I think, if they're going to keep him around. And I think, addressing the bringing someone in at right back, I think, needs to be something they consider. But what I will say is Conor Bradley is a very different kind of footballer to Trent Alexander-Arnold. And that doesn't mean he's not brilliant. It just means he's different. His passing range, his ability to decide a game from right back is maybe not what Trent's is.
Is he a better defender?
I think he is I think he has the potential to grow into being a better defender. I also think he loves playing, and Mo Salah loves playing with him, because I think, those sort of overlapping runs, it's something we saw a lot from Trent sort of in his early Liverpool years. And actually the past couple of years, he's been more sort of drifting into those central areas and inverting and playing balls from almost from midfield. So I think Conor Bradley is more of your traditional fullback, I guess.
Well, he might be more of an Arne Slot defender.
Yeah. And I think that the one thing that Liverpool will have to do if Trent goes is address where the creativity comes from in the team, because Trent has been their most creative source, really, outside of obviously Mo Salah, over the past 7-8 years. So I think, it's about ensuring that creativity comes from maybe somewhere else. Conor Bradley, you can certainly see if he's playing 30 games in the Premier League, you could see him racking up 10 assists quite easily. But I do think that Liverpool then would maybe need to look at bringing in, someone in midfield and attacking midfield, as someone with a little bit of cuteness and guile about them that can decide a game in the way that Trent has for Liverpool for so many years.
Okay, so right back, we've talked about central midfield. I think we all agree left back is a possible option. They might need a backup goalkeeper if Kelleher's off. Darwin Núñez likely to leave.
Yeah, I think all of the noises at the moment are pointing to an exit for him this summer. It's been a shame because I think, speaking to Liverpool fans, that there's not many players who have been people have been so keen to see do well at Liverpool. But 3 seasons in, and I'd argue he's probably regressed rather than progressed. So
who's going to hit the woodwork so much when he goes?
But you know what? I don't even think it's necessarily his finishing at this point. I think even when he was missing a lot of chances in his first 2 seasons at the club under Klopp, you always felt like he was involved in the game. You always felt like he could be decisive. And I think what we've seen in the past couple of months under Arne Slot is, one, he's hardly started a game. And 2, when he has played, sometimes he's just let games pass him by. And I think, well, if you're not scoring the goals and you're also not putting in the hard yards and linking up play in that sort of Firmino-esque way, then what are you doing there, really? So I think centre forward along with left back is probably the biggest one.
Kirk seems to be the left back option, doesn't he? He's got a relationship with Richard Hughes at Bournemouth. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Liverpool aren't right in the mix for that one. I mean, he left a cryptic Instagram comment on Dominic Szoboszlai's Instagram post the other day, which I think some fans have taken to mean it's a done deal. So I'm not quite sure
that's
about
the level
that.
of detail that we've got in our life. Look at the comments of Dominic Szoboszlai's Instagram.
Yeah.
Is that not something you do in your spare time?
No.
But yeah, so I definitely think he's someone who ticks a lot of boxes for Liverpool. They definitely very much like him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up there.
Do you know a name I heard for Liverpool? I'd be very surprised if it happened, but it was a name that came up in January. It was Jared Branthwaite at centre half. And that would cause a lot of consternation, wouldn't it, if that happened?
Yeah, well, I think that the main reason that wouldn't happen is because I think Everton would be very, very reluctant to do that deal. I think they would pretty much rather send Jared Branthwaite anywhere apart from Liverpool. But it's interesting, Branthwaite, because he was outstanding last season. There were talk, about him going to Manchester United. They obviously didn't put up the money that Everton wanted. Obviously, he's still had a good season, but I think he's maybe not quite.
No, he's not kicked on.
Kicked on necessarily, and so if those options were to be reduced, and then Liverpool were to swoop in and offer 60, 70 million, it'd be interesting to see how that played out. But yeah, I can't for all of those reasons. I can't quite see that happening.
Well, then the big question is the number 9. Obviously, we've talked about Arsenal. They are in the market for a forward this summer. Manchester United are going to try and sign a striker this summer. Do you right? I mean, Isak is probably the one that everybody would want. Do you think that is a goer at all for Liverpool? Who do you think they actually want to fill that position?
I think they definitely like Isak. But obviously, as things stand, sort of Newcastle have put a £150 million price tag on his head. Now, I'm not quite sure that anyone is going to stump up that kind of money. One thing I will say about Liverpool is, that the owners get a fair bit of criticism for maybe not spending as much as they should. But when they've needed to spend, when they've spotted a player who they feel can come in and transform the team, as they did with Van Dijk, as they did with Alisson Becker, they've not been afraid to put that money out there. We saw with the bid for Moises Caicedo a couple of seasons ago, they were willing to pay over 100 million for him, and obviously he ultimately decided that he wanted to go to Chelsea. But I think when they see a player who they feel can make the team immeasurably better, then they'll pay that money. So I think if they view Isak in that way, then I wouldn't be surprised to see them in that conversation. The one thing I will say is it's quite hard at the moment to sort of find what Arne Slot wants from his number 9. He got asked about it in a press conference the other week, and he sort of cheekily replied, "I want them to score goals," which obviously every manager does. But it's we're still not quite sure whether he wants more of that sort of Firmino type player who links play up and drops a little bit deeper, or whether he wants more of an out and out number 9. And obviously that will inform the thinking this summer.
Isak's really interesting, isn't it? Because he plays for Newcastle, a club that obviously got ambitions. They're going places, but we keep getting told about their situation in PSL, which will obviously ease a little bit if they get in the Champions League. But it's Liverpool, isn't it? I mean, if you're in a top player and Liverpool come in for you, the champions of the Premier League, it's really hard to turn that. And Liverpool are one of the great clubs, aren't they? And I think if they made a move for Isak, it could actually have become a bit of a saga, because Newcastle won't want to sell, but I'm sure Isak would want to go. I'm sure he would. I mean, it's Liverpool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult to turn a move like that down. I think if Liverpool would have to be serious about it, though. I mean, they'd have to come in with a big number. It'd have to be over 100 million. I think you could probably get him maybe for less than 150 million, but you'd have to come in with probably a British transfer record fee to even start the conversation. And then it's going to require the sort of back channeling and the kind of nudging and all of that sort of coercion that tends to go on with these big deals.
I think it'd be easier for them to do it than Arsenal. I just think as champions, as Liverpool, I think Liverpool are a different level to Arsenal. I just think in terms of the status of the club, it'd be hard for both. I just think they've got a slight advantage.
Unless Arsenal win the Champions League.
Well, that's a good point.
They could come back in as
you wouldn't
European
need him then,
champions.
would they?
Mikel Merino all the way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, thanks for joining us this week. I hope you've enjoyed the Liverpool special, and we'll be back again soon on the Football Reporters.